Got it. Well, I know there's always people who kind of come in at the straggle in, and that's fine. We'll just go on, and we'll just have to catch up to where we're at. So my name is Monica Meyer, and I'm going to be presenting this information to you tonight. I can set my timer so I know where I'm going. So a little bit, what I'm going to be talking about is, the parenting across the lifespan. And we know that it is to care for a child with autism, child, adolescent, adult takes a lot of energy. And some days you feel very overwhelmed and stressed, and other days you feel just completely vitalized, hopeful, encouraged, and that is our life. That's life as we know it. Parenting a child for a neurotypical child and raising a neurodivergent child across the lifespan isn't an easy role. And really, in order to be the best parent you can be, it's really something I always have to tell myself, although I tell families all the time, you need to take care of yourself. And I remember someone even saying that to me, you need to take care of yourself. My first question was, well, what does that look like? I don't know what that means, because I really didn't. I hadn't really thought about that, taking care of myself, because it just wasn't something I was really accustomed to. So, whoops, I need to jump ahead here. I kind of put some slides ahead of what I really wanted to say here.
And when do you, if we have a question, can we just shout them out whenever?
Just shout them out. Absolutely. Yes. So I wanted to just tell you a little bit about myself. And I know some people do know who I am, like Nancy, that I am a mom of 2 biological children. Molly is my oldest, and she's married, has 3 kids of her own, and just recently moved from to Gig Harbor, Washington, which I am delighted to no end. And then Michael is my second child. He is autistic, has an intellectual disability, an intractable seizure disorder, and a complex health condition. And Michael is 39 years old and currently resides with a supported living agency in our community. And he is the only person that is supported in his household, which a lot of people will say, well, how does that happen? Well, I'll get to how does that happen. So I'm going to jump back a couple of slides, and I apologize. Excuse me. I got to move things around so I can see what I'm doing. So really, what are your hopes and dreams for your sons and daughters? And that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight, and really talking about the path that I took, and hopefully I can give you some information on maybe not to do what I did or to do like, oh man, that's a good idea. I think I'll try something like that. But what we want to do is make sure that we have a place that is a safe place for our adult sons and daughters to live, our loved ones. They have a place to work, recreate, have money for fun and their expenses, being with family and friends, being able to contribute to the community, access to healthcare, and access to services based on the disability of autism. And I'll get into, really delve into some of the details of these slides, because they're a little ambiguous at this moment, but I have slides to detail some of those. I got it. There we go. I'm sorry, I'm moving things around on my screen here so I can see a little better. So I remember doing this training some years ago. Well, this is actually an amended version of it, and I've added and subtracted a lot of it. But the thoughts that go through the minds of moms and dads in the wee morning hours. This was one of the big ones for me, is what happens, not if, but when I die. What happens? What happens to Michael? What happens? Where will he or she go? Will he have a choice and end up in some other part of the state where he won't be close to family, where he won't be close to people that he knows or a community that he's familiar with? Will he understand why he isn't living with us? Will he think that he's been abandoned? Who will care for him or her? Will they be good to him? Will they get him? Will they understand him? How long will it take for them to get to know when he takes milk and butter out of the refrigerator and asks for Annie, is his way of asking for Annie's mac and cheese? Will they get and understand Michael's sleeping patterns and sleeping habits, like sleeping with his head at the end of the bed rather at the foot of the bed rather at the head of the bed? Will people understand that he needs visual supports to communicate his wants and needs? Will the support staff understand that when he puts on a heavy coat, this doesn't mean he's hot. I mean, he's cold. It means that he needs some sensory input. Will his, and of course I'm putting sister or brother in here, help with the support needs when I'm gone? Will he or she live with us until we die? And then what? And then, God forbid, what happens if his favorite DVD breaks? That used to be something. I had a friend years ago, and her son just actually recently passed away, that he loved, and I might be totally aging myself, but they were cassette players, and it was made by Fisher Price, and it was just this little compact Fisher Price tape recorder and tape player, and he loved that thing. And matter of fact, whenever he broke it, she would just write Fisher Price, and they would send her a new one. And then after a while, they would send her 3 or 4 at a time, because they knew how much their son loved this device. So, that's kind of what we have done for Michael. My Michael loves anything that has to do with Catholic nuns, and I'll get into the reason why here in just a little bit. But thank goodness you can stream movies now, because before it was just like, holy cow, the VHS, we have to find another sister act, or then it was a DVD, and then it was like, oh my gosh, what's next? So technology has been a curse and a blessing all in one. Because when Michael was born and up until he was just before he was out of high school, there weren't DVD players. I mean, there weren't laptops. I know that sounds it sounds so foreign, because 25 years ago, 25 years ago, we didn't have laptops. We didn't have portable DVD players. We didn't have these things. And as I get into my story, you're going to see what we did instead, and to help Michael's life be less anxiety provoking. The thing that I actually wrote a blog on this not too long ago was parents, our role as lifelong case managers. And what I wanted to be able to share with you is, regardless of where we are in the journey of our children, whether they're living at home or not, if you're a guardian, you will be that lifelong case manager. And what the definition of a case manager is, it helps people who are in difficult situations with advice, figure out what kind of help they need, help them find the services they need, create plans for treatment or recovery, work with the health and human services agencies, and keep tabs on a client's progress and treatment plan. Does that sound like anything that we do as parents? Yeah, exactly. Sound familiar? Well, we can't go it alone. We need to put a plan in place and strengthen our sea legs. We have to be able to go with the flow. We have to have a plan. But obviously my plan I had for Michael 20 years ago is significantly different than it is today. And that he's at the age of 39 when he exited school, you know, I think it was 2001. I mean, services, technology have obviously jumped leaps and bounds since then. And so it's familiarizing yourself constantly with the service system, what's available, what isn't available. And the other thing I really want to emphasize is you can create things on your own. It doesn't mean that, it's the only options that are available. And I'll get into that here in just a few minutes. So like I said, who I am and where I started. And then a little bit more about me is that I'm married to my husband, Rob, of 26 years. This is my second marriage, and have 3 stepdaughters, all within the range of age of my children. So I have Michelle, who's 46, Andrea, 42, Molly, 41, my Michael, 39, and Heather is 38. So it was a interesting time. Let me just put that. Having a blended family, and I'll get into that. My first marriage, of whom I shared my 2 children with, ended in a contemptuous divorce. And unfortunately, we've been divorced for 32 years. And as if we just had the divorce yesterday. Long story. I won't go into it, but it's been something of a difficult journey. I remained single for 6 years before I married Rob. And so parenting as a single parent was a challenge. I can tell you that there were many things that happened during that time frame. And I can say the things that really helped me through was when I had family. Not that they lived nearby, but they lived close enough. My mom and dad, they were within 2 hours of us. And I can tell you first, just before I start getting into further, I might start crying. So just bear with me. That's it, because it is a story of a lot of ups and downs and a lot of emotions. So my mom and dad, they would come up from the Eugene Springfield area, and they would spend the weekend with me, not with their grandchildren. Oh, of course, they loved to be around their grandchildren, but they spent time with me to help me get caught up on the things that I needed to do around my house, which I never could ever thank them for what they did, because that was very meaningful to me. My spiritual life, my belief in a higher power, however you want to say it, but I believe in God, in that it was something that really, even when things were just awful, I knew I wasn't alone. I'm sorry, this is just, when I started writing this training about a week ago, I just, every time I would do it, it's like, all right, you got to pull yourself together, lady, because you can't be, sobbing and bawling all over the place. But I'm sorry, things just happen. So at any rate, that's, having family, having a faith, having friends, dear friends, and getting to know people in the service system, in families who are also working through the service system and trying to find supports. And at the time, again, to go back, there wasn't the internet. There wasn't support groups, online support groups. You had to go to a support group. It's not like, and then that way you had to find a childcare provider and so on and so forth. So it was a lot of hit and miss. Go forward, Rob and I have been married, like I said, for 26 years. And we have 5 children between us and 8 grandchildren all together. So beginning with the diagnosis in early childhood, though Michael was originally diagnosed with a developmental disability. He eventually, at the age of 7, which in nowadays is late being diagnosed, and it was very happenstantial. I happened to be at the time was a billing technician for a internal medicine and pediatric office. And so I had pediatricians around me all the time, and I'd ask questions. And of course, they didn't really have a lot of information either. They didn't really know a whole lot about autism because it really wasn't talked about much in 1980, between 1983 and 1991. They're really, and even before, I would say anything before 1991 was just kind of an ambiguous kind of term. With the exception of, I had one pediatrician that came in one day a week, and she was the one that diagnosed Michael, because I had him in for an ear infection. And she looked at me, she goes, "Monica, I didn't know you had a son with autism." And I was like, "Well, neither did I," to be quite frank. And that kind of really started the ball rolling, learning more about autism. And I had to do it with books. I know I'm sounding so ancient, for heaven's sakes, and it just seems like it was yesterday. And then Michael started having seizures, and really things got a lot of very convoluted. And going back to like the spiritual life, and I can tell you, it's still a struggle for families to even participate in spiritual life when they have a loved one with high acuity needs. A friend of mine, actually three of us, came together, and we developed a special needs mass. And it was, we had a priest that would come from the University of Portland, and I live in Vancouver. Actually, I live in Battleground. At the time, I lived in Vancouver. And he would come over and say the mass. And it was it was a place that you just felt like you could just relax. I mean, there were kids, sometimes they would be screeching, running around, climbing on chairs. Everybody was accepted. It was just like, it was no big deal. And Father Berg, who was the priest who I still am in contact with, he was like, he is a saint. I mean, the things that he just was absolutely, completely carefree and was very accepting. And that was, it was a delight. Michael made his first communion during that mass. While Molly, she attended her first communion class with her other students from the parish. So there was always this kind of a divide. It's interesting now, churches are asking, and I've been asked on several occasions to come in and do some consulting on how to make their parish or their spiritual community or their church community more inclusive. And one that I went to just recently, what they wanted to do is, I mean, again, it's a mindset and evolution of how we support people. And what they wanted to do was, they wanted to do a good thing. And they wanted to basically build a place for these kids to go, rather than how do we include them. And so that I'm still, like I said, a little kind of dumbfounded that it was like, really? I mean, people are still thinking that we need to exclude people. So it's still an evolution. It's still, we've got generations of people that if we don't have our children, or our children were not included, and if they're still not included, where is the example? Where is the model that people with disabilities belong and should be part of our community? So I can tell you the things that I would say not to do, if any of you are young parents, parents of young children, I should say, is that, I was a doer, a type A personality. I didn't ask for help. I felt it was my responsibility to do everything, even while married. I mean, I didn't think that was even something that my husband was working, although I was working. I worked a graveyard shift or a swing shift so I could be at home with my kids during the day. In hindsight, let me tell you, I don't feel I was the best parent I could be, and I would have done something different because this, although it eliminated the need for childcare, which was very difficult to find, I didn't get a whole lot of sleep, and didn't always make me the happiest person to be around, I can tell you. If I had to do it over, like I said, oh heavens, if I had the opportunity to talk to my younger self, I'd take a breath and work out a more functional plan. You can't do it all. Even as a single parent, you can't do it all. Although a lot of it is on your plate, if you can do anything to be able to find ways to support yourself and to take care of yourself, I would certainly encourage that, because otherwise your health will suffer. Your children, their well-being will suffer. And not to say that because I worked so much that my marriage suffered, that's a whole other issue. But for a lot of folks that I know, families that I've worked with for years, it's just this, it can be very contentious. And especially if you have other children, it's almost like it's a yours and mine type of situation. Well, you take care of this child and I'll take care of this child, or you take this one to these games and you take that one to those games. Not to say that that isn't a typical result in any family. It's when only one person does the work to support the person with more acute care needs. What I should have done and what I would have, like I said, if I had the opportunity to talk to myself, I would have reduced my hours or even quit my job. I would have insisted on my children's dad to work a second job. We would have stayed in a rental house and not feel pressured to buy a home and live the American dream of being a homeowner. And what I can say is, of course, this is all water under the bridge, but hopefully not for you. If this resonates with you, to look at life through a different lens of community, equity, and balance, it can be possible. It is hard. And as I said in the beginning, it is something that is lifelong. You will be the lifelong provider in this person's life. And just to kind of go back, Christy, yes, the new autism statistics came out in March by the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. From 1 in 54 to 1 in 36 children are born with autism. Yeah, and Deanna says that feels like the old saying, children should be seen but not heard. And, being different generations have different mindsets, and we live in conjunction with basically 4 to 5 generations, like the traditional baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and I can't remember the next one, but we all have a different mindset and a vision or a viewpoint of how life was and how life is. And so it's kind of funny. I feel like I'm straddled between the two of them sometimes, because I'm still at that age where I'm still working. I shouldn't say I'm still working. I'll probably work until I literally fall over. But that families are at different points in their life and in their journey with their children. I think it was about 4 years ago, Michael was diagnosed with a genetic disorder, which is something very new. I think I had mentioned before, Michael has an intractable seizure disorder. And with the encouragement of his neurologist, she said, we should probably do a genetic testing to see if Michael has a certain type of seizure disorder, and that there are many treatments, actually genetic therapies that can help with those types of seizures. And I'm like, well, I'm all for that. Unfortunately, he didn't have any of those types of seizure that there were treatments for, but we did find that he had a genetic disorder, which was only discovered in 2009. And so there's just a very small group of people, actually right now, it's still under 1,000 people in the world. Michael's the third oldest in the world with this genetic disorder, which is called SYNGAP1. And it is with the symptoms of having an autism spectrum disorder, low muscle tone, really slow milestones in walking and manipulatives and those types of things, slow in talking, and seizures. And when I first read this, I was like, holy cow, this described Michael to a T. So the point that I was making, that with regardless of where you are, and I feel like I'm straddling it sometimes, it's because I have families in the SYNGAP group, of which there are many that are under the age of 15. And they want to know what's going on. How did this happen? Or where did this happen? And I feel sometimes I get pulled back and trying to help and mentor people. And on the other hand, not have, not go through some of the trauma that our family went through. It can be a very difficult process to go through. But even at that, it all takes balance. And that is the point, is you got to take care of yourself first. You have to figure out what that means. And it's similar to, if you're on an airline and they go through the whole spiel of, wear your safety jackets, and if there's lack of oxygen, this thing will drop down, and you put it over your nose first before you assist anybody else. And that was one of the only thing that really resonated with me. It was like, well, that makes sense. If I try and help other people, I'm going to fall over because I have not helped myself. And so I've, tried to find things in my life that has helped me. And some of those have been, I love gardening. I love anything that has to do with gardening. And that's what I do. I've got to be out, getting my hands dirty, being outside. Those are the things that bring me strength and help me. So those things are important. And sometimes it just takes time to figure out what that is. And I find it listening and or not listening, but reading, folks in support groups that, art is something that is really something that helps bring out, that brings a person peace. Music, a lot of art, music, anything that has to do with more of the creative side of the brain, the brain has a very positive effect. The one thing that we need to know, and you need to just, all come to grips with is our lives are not typical. Typical in the realm that my friends and families, they live a different life than I do. Looking through the lens of, even through my daughter, she's got her 3 kids, and they are constantly on the go. They've got sports that they're doing, and, I kind of stand back. It's almost like watching a movie, because it was not an experience that I ever had. They just live a different experience. I'm happy for them. I'm so ecstatic that Molly gets to have this opportunity. But looking at people as their sons and daughters age and grow up, it's like, I'm still here. But I'm again straddling sometimes 2 different worlds. Inclusion was not, or is not, the new concept that it is now. Inclusion was a nice thing to do. Wouldn't that be nice? There's still work to be done, and it's still evolving. But I know that there's still classrooms and schools that have segregated classrooms, in the fact that they might have a life skills, or they have different kinds of classrooms for kids to go into, rather than having inclusive processes that we can help people learn and work together. As I said, schools and churches are trying to be as inclusive as they possibly can, but that isn't always that is still a work in progress. That becomes a work in progress based on our reactions, how we want things to be for our families, how our voice is going to change make things different. Because, like going to this one church here just recently and seeing that a person still has this mindset of exclusion, it was like, holy cow. I mean, where are the voices that have said this isn't acceptable? Our loved ones should be here in our church community just as every other child should be. Although, yes, we should have opportunities where we might need a sensory room, we might need different things, but the whole idea that everybody should belong is something that is still an evolving process, and it's our voice, regardless of where we are on the continuum of being a parent, is what we need to do. And this is, I used to say recently, not years ago, that I would say our children, regardless of their age, are the ambassadors for their disability, which is true in one respect, but it should not be on the backs of our children, whether they're a child or an adult with a disability, that they have to make their mark in the world, when it should be based on how do we help our community know that inclusion means all, that inclusion, that it shouldn't be just through trial and error, that we try and have our children either thrive or fail in different community areas, and either they're accepted or not, should not be something that is always measured on the backs of an individual. Rather, how can we help a community become more inclusive? What do they need to learn? And these are things that, like I said, over many years, it got to the point where I just kept on thinking, I'm so tired of constantly having to either, prepare the place, almost make excuses that my son might make this noise, he might do this, he might do that, rather than just being able to say, and that had to do a lot with my growing up as well, and just, saying, of course he has a right to be here. I remember even going to a family reunion, and of course I did this purposeful. I had a cousin who was a couple years older than me, and he has since passed away. He also had autism, and he lived in a residential habilitation center, basically an institution in Oregon, up until the last 5 years of his life. And he was institutionalized at the age of 4. I didn't even know he existed until I was in high school. I was like, who are you talking about? And come to find out that Brian had lived in an institution his whole life. And it was like with my intent that Michael was going to go to this family reunion, because he was of a new generation, just literally the next generation. I mean, that he was included when my cousin and my cousin and his siblings didn't recognize his value in the community. Excuse me. I had a salad before I got here, and I think I have a piece of almond on the top of the roof of my mouth. I know, a little bit too much information. So here, this is, again, going through the process. One, for you to understand that when Michael was born in 1983, he was of one of the first generation of children that had the right to a free and appropriate public education. It was in 1974 that Public Law 142 came into existence that said that, yes, children with disabilities have the right to go to school. Prior to that, they didn't. And most children stayed at home or they went to an institutional setting. They were still, well, they're still trying to get it right. But they're still, when I looked at, when my daughter went to school, she went to our neighborhood school, grade school, I mean, kindergarten through 6th grade, and then she went to middle school. In the meantime, Michael went to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It was his 6th school before he was ever in the neighborhood school with his own sister. And that was only for 1 year that he went to. They basically, they would start a program here, start a program there. And so he was bused literally all over the county. A lot of it was with, a lot of it was just because they had a teacher that wanted to have their program here. So they would just bus all the kids there. And then eventually they created the early childhood center. He was there for a couple of years and then went to kindergarten, and then finally kindergarten through 3rd grade. And then he went to the same school as Molly did. And so that was, I mean, that was, I can tell you, as being, again, a young mom, just running around all over, seemingly all over town, because I can tell you, I was the mom that chased the school bus the first week, or I should say the first month of school, because I wanted to make sure that he was safe and that he got off at the right place. There, in the dynamics of just any marriage, I mean, there is the possibility of a divorce. One of the, I believe the odds are now in favor of marriage. I think it's like 54 to 46 divorces. So the marriages have it over the divorce. But that being said, when you have a child with an exceptional need, it is going to make it much more difficult. If it's possible to be able to set aside differences. I mean, easier said than done. And I can say that even now, that the focus would be on the children's well-being, and be parental partners. Like I said, it's all easier said than done. My husband of 11 years at the top, like, it pulled the rug out from underneath me, as well as my children. Molly, obviously, more so than Michael, but Michael felt his absence as well. So those things, you know, I would say things happen and we can let it just eat us up, or we can figure out a way and basically make a new path. That being said, I had to sell our house, our family home. It was always a constant fear of making ends meet, having to work full time. There was finances, trying to blend that with child support as well as finding daycare. Always having the fear of being evicted because I had a kid that kicked the walls and screamed at night. And so these were all things that just wore on your heart. In the meantime, it's like, you know, I had to think back, how did I keep my ever-loving mind from just not oozing out of my head? Because I mean, there was just so many things going on. But I do know that it was because of having family support, having my spiritual support, and having friends that made this I mean, I don't want to even say doable. I mean, it just helped me get through those life hurdles. And this is where our well, Michael's I always say he does have quite a perseveration when it comes to nuns. And it really started at the age of, when Molly was the age of 9, and she started attending a girls' club that happened to be at a convent. And every 3rd Sunday, Michael and I would drive Molly over to this convent that she would have the afternoon with these sisters who wore full habits. And you know, this is really when Michael started his perseveration. that I can tell you at the age of 7, he is now 39, is still something that is very important to him ever in all his life. So it's something that has certainly stayed with him. So I just wanted to share with you a little bit about Molly. And this was something Molly, she wrote just a few days ago. And you can see this picture. This is when she was actually just out of high school. And Michael, and it says proud sister, and fun and smile and joyful. And Michael is drawing a nun. And we were out on a pier of all things, crabbing out, and just having, that's what we did. But so Molly's story is, I paint so I don't have to talk about myself. But there's some fun in understanding why people do what they do. And here's my why. Meet my brother, Michael. I talk about him time to time. He was diagnosed with autism before it was really known, early 90s, I believe. And actually it was early 90s. And was more recently diagnosed with SYNGAP1, a gene mutation if you're a Googler, a couple of years ago. Actually, it's been 4 years ago. His passion for nuns. He watches Sister Act and Nonsense on repeat every day, all day, since Sister Act hit VHS. He draws nuns over and over, and he really enjoys watching other people draw and paint nuns. He visits the convent weekly and sometimes bi-weekly with me. The same convent that she once was part of the Franciscan Girls Club. And she said, for a hot minute, I was convinced my calling was to be a nun. I wanted to travel the world helping people. And that seemed like the best way to make that dream a reality. It says we both went through a lot of hard times. During those years, I was visiting the convent. His passion transitioned from vacuums, he loved vacuums, to nuns rather quickly, with a side of fire truck stations and fire people. Sometimes about something about kind people with welcoming arms, I think, and I think it is the same of why Michael really gravitated towards the sisters. But all that is to say, I drew for him for literal survival, to bring down his anxiety, to connect and communicate, to understand each other. It was all through art, not words, never words. And when I wasn't drawing for him, I was drawing to disconnect from a world that seemed far harsher than a little person could process. I drew to pass time. I colored to feel something. And art became a means of everyday survival. And still it is. Also, I had no TV access during Sister Act playing because it played 24/7. And this is on the right is one of Molly's art pieces. And I loved the notations on the top where it says, you can carry it all. You can carry it all, but you shouldn't have to. And I think this is something that really resonates with this webinar tonight. So while I tend to not talk about Michael much, it's because I always felt that his privacy keeps him safe. But turns out awareness keeps him safer. Awareness that when he's in a restaurant speaking extra loud about nuns, he's just feeling the excitement. And instead of being alarmed, my hope is you can also share his joy. So that is my why today. That's enough extrovertedness for me today. So Molly is an extra special young lady. And just that she and her husband and kids moved up from San Diego. They have jumped around, but their first move was to Florida, and then it went to Dallas, and then to Tokyo, Japan, and back to Dallas, and then San Diego. And with a very intentional plan, they moved back to the Northwest because I'm not getting any younger. And Molly knows that she's going to be the one that steps in when I'm no longer here. So all, which, that was always the plan, but she has taken the plan to the nth degree, and which has kind of pushed me into thinking different things that I never thought about. And that's one of the things I wanted to share with you today is, good golly, being open and listening to other people, what they think would be a good plan, because the idea is that Michael will live on the same property that she and her husband, and they intend to build a house, and that Michael will have an ADU and will have full care, and that Molly will be be part of his life, as I have been throughout his whole life. She wants to take over that role along with her children. Of course, hopefully they'll be much older, and I will live until my 90s, but at any rate. So as I've gone through this, I mean, just giving you information about being open, taking care of yourself, being planful, and learning about what is there, what's relevant, what could be. And what I can tell you again from early life is, having to drive around different childcare providers, because Molly's childcare provider that she had gone to did not want to care for Michael, because she couldn't take care of all of his needs. So Michael went to a different childcare provider. Of course, they're about 5 miles apart, and I had to get up at 6 o'clock. I had to leave the house at 6 o'clock to get them to their childcare provider so I can get to work at 7, then race home at 3:30 to be able to meet Michael's bus at 4 o'clock. Those weren't, I can tell you, those weren't the most positive time, I don't want to say positive times. They were hard, but I do know that of all things, of having a divorce, that every other weekend I had a weekend to myself. And that was something that I took advantage of, either catching up on sleep, doing my gardening, or being able to just, my favorite place was going to the coast and being with my folks. So although it was not the best scenario, there was a silver lining in that I did take those times. As I was saying, maintaining some consistency for us living in Cascade Park is an area of Vancouver. Molly went to school with all the same kids from kindergarten through high school. She graduated with, the same kids. And so as important as it was for Michael to have the consistency of having siblings, Michael's sibling, that she had as much support as possible, because as a single parent, I can tell you the majority of my time was focused on Michael, was what, Michael's care, and he has always needed and continues to need really direct support 24/7. The idea of, I remember thinking, trying to recruit and hire respite care providers, there were the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it just seemed like we had them all. And they came and went. And again, this is one of the unfortunate realities, is that Molly had the responsibility of kind of looking out for Michael. She would, depending on the child care provider, and I started to find home child care providers that would stay at the house, that sometimes we had really good ones and sometimes not so good ones. And of course, you want to beat yourself up, but you know what? You have to do what you have to do. It is definitely a process of maintaining some sort of semblance of life. It's still the same way today. It's still trying to find all those things that you can connect, that you can dot the I's with, that you can make sure that your kids are safe, that they're taken care of, that in some way or another you can maintain some sort of semblance of a healthy family life. And it takes energy and effort. there's always the process of going through grief, anxiety, and guilt. The should have, would have, should have, could have, would have, there is, and there was no roadmap. There really still isn't any roadmap. It's how you plan, how you want, other than what the school has mapped out for you. You have early intervention services. You have, the 3 to 5 program. You have elementary, middle school, high school, transition program, and then the doors close. And at that point, it's like, well, where do we go now? It is no longer an entitlement. It becomes now a process of, one, if they qualify, and 2, if the state has funding, and 3, if there's availability. So what I can tell you is you're going to go through all of the grief, anxiety, and guilt, because it's, you might think, gosh, I should have been planning for this years ago. And I can tell you, when I started thinking about Michael and where he was going to live, he was 12 years of age. And I still know of families that are, I'm working with a family right now whose son has had some significant difficulties. And, their mindset is that he's going to live with us until we die. And then I have to ask, what happens when you die? And then the look on their face was, well, isn't there a place for him to go? I said, no, there isn't. There are no places. And you have to be cognizant of that. And like I said, that we had that role of being a lifelong case manager, because that's what we're doing. We are sometimes having to blaze a trail that was never there before, that we have to challenge the status quo because it may or may not meet your needs of your son or daughter or loved one. It is, like I said, it's sometimes we have to think, what would be the best thing? And then create your own. One of the things that really, set us on made a zigzag was Michael's seizures. Although he started having seizures at the age of 3, they stopped as unusual as they started. They unusually stopped all on their own until he started puberty. And if you are a Googler, you will read that at least 35% of young adults or individuals with autism on the onset of puberty start having seizures. And so the balance of medications, blood work, medical medication delivery, to 3 different households, it's something like, holy cow. Not only you're a case manager, but you happen to be the nurse or the pharmacist all in one, and then talking with different doctors that still don't understand quite, have a good understanding of autism at all. Whoops, hold on. I think I slipped forward. So for Michael, having an intractable partial complex seizure disorder, say that 3 times really quick. He had different doctors, hospital, ER visits. On Michael's typical day, he could have 20 to 40 focal seizures and 1 to 2 drop seizures daily. On a bad day, he can experience 40 to 60 focal seizures with 2 to 4 tonic seizures and 1 to 2 drop seizures. He can experience bodily harm and yet get up, shake it off, and go on with life. He literally is an example of resilience. It's something I can't imagine have that many and still want to get up, draw another nun as life goes on. Just means I can, get out a new marker. Trying to find doctors, one that understood autism, which are still very few and far between. And then secondly, a neurologist that had a good understanding of autism and what are some of the things that we could do, especially when you have a person who is not a good historian, who can't say, oh, by the way, this is what my seizures feel like, or this is what happens when this when this type of seizure happens, this is the aura I get. It might be that, after having a tonic seizure, I have a severe headache. These are all things that are basically sometimes could be a guessing work. So some of the things that I have done throughout Michael's lifespan is adjusting sometimes my work location. Although I did have a career plan, it kind of went sideways, and I started having to do different work so that I could be nearby and could be flexible to meet both of my kids' needs. Would I do that again? Absolutely. Matter of fact, I still do that by having that I do have my own consulting business. I do training and technical assistance in the field of autism. It is so that I can have a lot of flexibility. I still go to all of Michael's doctor's appointments. I'm in contact with his doctor. I'm not kidding, at least once a month, not once a month, once a week, about some sort of either it's his medication, or it's a type of seizure, or an injury because of a seizure, or we have a different looking seizure. In the meantime, also trying to keep in balance what Molly was going through. Would I do this different? No, I wouldn't. I coached her basketball, helped her with her fast pitching. I was present at her ball games, sometimes just in the car so that I could be sitting beside Michael and drawing while I could watch her. Birthday parties, her joy, her friendship, her joy in childhood. And like I said, having and connecting with my family, her grandparents, her cousins. And through all of this, Molly went through a health scare that we thought she actually had bone cancer when she was 9. And she had to go through 2 surgeries, and it finally, although she had to have a bone graft in her pelvic bone, she had what was called an aneurysmal bone cyst. And although it was not cancerous, it was eating the pelvic bone. And so they had to chip out a big part of her pelvic bone and put in a cast of bone so that it could start growing back. Again, talk about resilience. She had that done like in February of a year. I can't remember what year it was. She was 9. By the end of June, she was sliding into bases, playing softball again. So she fortunately was able to heal. But I can tell you just the agony of going through that, watching her. And this is, again, one of the things that just becomes one of the I don't want to say casualties of war, but it was one of the casualties of being in a single family, of a divorced parent with a child with special needs, that she took up some of the brunt of being the absent parent, having to do some of the things. And when she wasn't able to do that, I can tell you that things were very difficult. And that's just, that's something she and I have had to go through and work out in our own ways as well, is that there wasn't anything else. There was no other place. There wasn't, the McDonald's house that could take care of her, or for Michael, what I could take care of her. It just wasn't. I mean, life isn't planned, and things continue to happen and show up, and that being able to, and I've always just kind of like, you got to plow through it, and then you have to ask for help. You have to grieve over what you have gone through, what you've lost, and then have a celebration for the fact that you managed to get through it. That is the value of looking at, the other side of the coin. To looking at the positives and the values that happen from that. She was in high school when Molly chose to live with her dad because of the amount of stress that she was having.
being that extra person. My astonishment, the gut punch, the anger, a lot of things that went with that, that also my realization that I couldn't do this alone, that I needed more help with Michael. And those were times where it was just the most difficult part, is because realizing I couldn't do this alone. I couldn't manage to do everything. And obviously what was happening is that Molly was experiencing the trauma of being in a family with a single parent and a child with extraordinary support needs, that she was missing out on her life, and she had to escape. And obviously, as I said, I was very angry. I was astonished. I thought we were we were partners in crime. And I realized, obviously, even now, it's just like she was a little girl. And an exceptional person. And she deserved, everything that any other child would. So for 6 years, although being single, I did remarry. And people ask me why. And sometimes I ask myself why. Sometimes I still do. No, I'm kidding. That also brought in additional children and responsibilities. I can tell you that Michael's social anxiety and his behavioral challenges, his elopement, it all came around in a very abrupt way because life changed for him completely. And he was not a happy man, or young man, I should say. And that was something that we had to work on and figure out. And like I said, left turns and purpose is soon after that, of all things, I was fired from my position as being in clinical management. I moved from billing to becoming a clinical manager, and was fired because of my time I took away from the clinic to be with Michael, trying to find childcare providers, coming in late. During that time frame in the 90s, there was no Family Leave Act. There wasn't anything. If you weren't able to make your employment conditions, then you were no longer needed. And so much to my chagrin, in my pain, because I'd been with this company for 15 years, or this medical institution, that this is where my life kind of took a left turn. And I started working in early childhood as a family resource coordinator. I co-chaired the Early Childhood Interagency Council. I really started to invest and put a lot of time and effort into disabilities. I was part of the Clark County Disability Leadership Program. Like I said, Michael, at that time, Michael went into middle school. The changes, his aggression increased, his seizures increased. And then I really started thinking, what happens after high school? What's going to happen for Michael? The what, the where, the who, tapping into other families and advocates and talking about this. This is something that now became something that was really, I felt was facing me more than anything, because it was like, I just felt like I was looking at the watch going, holy cow, we only have 3 more years of school. Now what the heck? I guess I'm always, the 3 things of looking at the past, the present, and the future. I was always looking at the future, forgetting what the present was going on, and, totally not even thinking about the past. I could and have been sometimes my own worst enemy, but I'm here. So I guess I need to give myself kudos for that. But what I started to do at that time is I advocated and started looking at the development of alternative community living, because I knew what was available for Michael at the time. There was no way that that was going to work for him. His social anxiety, his ability to be with other people, although he does a really good job in very small increments. on his terms. But there were other families that had the same thing that were going on that I felt. And we came together and we started doing some activism and some advocacy for the development of a companion home option for the state of Washington. We developed our own 501c3 nonprofit agency. We did legislative advocacy, and we had the passage of a trial program. I became the executive director of Autism Community Services, and then for 5 years created successful examples of companion homes in Southwest Washington for individuals between the ages of 12 and 30. That included my own son, Michael. So as I had started going through the process of life and learning, looking to the future and not just taking it or leaving it, meaning what was available, was that going to, I mean, how can you pound a square peg into a round hole, was just kind of my thought process. I mean, it was just something that really, that I struggled with. And it was like at the very beginning when we talked about the slide of, those things that keep you up at night, that was one of them. From the community, Autism Community Services, I started and after the 5 years started working for our educational service district. And at the time, my job was to, believe it or not, was to help families and teachers come together in mediation over IEPs. Out of that work, I created an autism regional autism consulting cadre, and basically it was getting school districts in our ESD 112 region, which is really the bigger part of Southwest Washington, east of Golden Dale, and then west to the Pacific Ocean, and north through Lewis County. So there were a lot of schools, actually 30 different schools, and they participated. And for 12 years, I coordinated this and had the opportunity to do a lot of training, a lot of bringing in national experts, getting cutting edge best practice services and supports. It was something that really gave me the opportunity to learn best practice evidence-based support strategies that really not only helped Michael, but also started the consulting that I did for other autism community service families, and really was the impetus that really launched my work that I do right now with consulting. While Michael was still in school, again, these are things that it was through innovation. It wasn't just through expectations, because there wasn't anything. His extended school year program was like 2 weeks in the middle of summer, that basically they went to a classroom, and that was about the extent of it, that I developed in collaboration with a program that was going on in Portland called Autism Children's Activity Program. And it was a collaboration of many schools, DDA, Boys and Girls Club, I said schools, and schools, DDA, Boys and Girls Club. Anyway, and different families came together. We had some bus companies that did the transportation. We worked with the local transportation company in our areas, C-Tran or C-Van, and we took kids. We had a certified teacher that would come, that we would meet in a classroom the first part of the day, like about the first 45 minutes of the day, and we had near peer age supports, and there would typically be 2 peers to 3 students, and we went all over Clark County and sometimes into Portland, went to restaurants, went to swimming. We did everything that you would do at, if you're on a summer program for, a neurotypical kid, that the near peer age supports. They wanted to go swimming. They wanted to go out to lunch. They wanted to go do these things. It's like, let's make it happen. We rode the bus. We went everywhere. And those were some of the best learning moments, not only for Michael, but for the near peer age students. Some of them were high school or just starting college, that they were over the age of 18, that they really wanted to learn more. And I had, of that group, several that did go on to either becoming special ed teachers or just general ed teachers, and or nurses or CNAs. And what I said, we kept on talking about, I kept on thinking about, all right, now we're looking at Michael's life. We're looking at what he could do during the summer. And then we got into his transition years, 18 to 21. And, going through 4 years of finally getting teachers to understand best practices, strategies, supports for Michael to reduce his behaviors, and that he started to read, and he started doing basic math, and he was able to socialize. These were all things that didn't happen until he was in high school. That when it came time for his 18 to 20 year transition program, the teacher that he had, and again, you have to remember this is in 2001, that she said that, he's going to have to abide by my rules. And if he can't do it, then he's out of the program. And she didn't care what the IEP said. And I said, all right. And so I wrote a proposal to the special ed director for the school district, and identified not only the cost it would take for the 2-on-1 paraeducators that they had on Michael, and what it would cost that if I put the program together based on what I did with the ACAP project, I would save the school district almost $2,500 a month if they gave me the money and I developed Michael's own community-based instruction program. So his transition program was based on the project that I put together, not what they had. And Michael had more success in that based on what I had already done with the autism community, or ACAP, the children's autism program, that Michael was able to be able to have the experience in the community and not just being stuck in a classroom. And it was a great program. And Roxanne, the summer program you speak of, does something like that exist for elementary, middle, and high school? And I can tell you, it was, like I said, it's the ACAP program, and now that's been 15 years ago. It was a program that went through all age groups. That was specifically in Portland. I only focused on high school, and that was just because he was. And so there is the Autistic Community Activity Program is still in much in existence, and they do have summer programs. And the one that in Portland, and this has been since 1987, that they have been providing quality 8-week-long day camp programs. And their program, and this is what we did, the summer camp provided structure in a variety of community settings while teaching vital and much neglected skills, and oftentimes social skills and activities of daily living, being able to ride public transportation, have appropriate community behaviors, reading environmental and social cues, etc. And that is, like I said, is still in their website. Let me see here. I will put it in the chat. I can, come on. It is www.acappdx.org. And I used to know everybody there, but obviously it's been quite some time. But at any rate, it was, like I said, it was something that, again, I continued to learn, innovate, sometimes was to create, because Michael was that square peg. He wasn't fitting into any of the round circles. And I wasn't going to put him through misery and trauma because he didn't fit in. But I can tell you the programs that I did develop for Michael, it met many people's support needs, as well as having an opportunity to be able to teach near peer age what it means to be included, what it means to have the responsibility for another person, how to be an instructor, how to be a job coach, how to be all these things that, like I said, the benefits were vast. And would I do something like that again? Absolutely. One of the things, again, through this whole process of, going through milestones, like for Molly's graduation, Michael's still in high school, and it was just a delight to see her, be able to go to college, fulfill her hopes and dreams. But of course, that led to my anxiety of, oh my gosh, my little girl is she's gone to school. And I can tell you at the time that Molly left for college, the thing that she wasn't going to miss, and she said, if it's him, she wanted Michael in her rearview mirror. She was done being the care provider. She was done with him. She didn't want to have really much to do with him at all for a good solid 6 weeks. And I say 6 weeks because it was just something that Michael was in her heart. And obviously that you can tell that it's still in her heart that he is, that she just is, just being away from him. It was just a part that it just became part of her. And while she was at college, Michael he started living in a companion home. And this was one of those areas, and God bless my husband, because my husband and I, we moved out of our house and rented a house for a couple of years so that Michael could stay in the home that he grew up in, so that he would have the neighbors that knew him, that he would be familiar with the Safeway, the grocery, the gas station, all the things that were familiar to him. Would I do that again? Possibly not. Michael is not living at that house, and that was an unfortunate scenario or situation, and that unfortunately had to do with my ex-husband, but we won't go there because this is all a very positive thing that we're talking about tonight. But at any rate, that would not have been something I would probably do again, although many families of Autism Community Services did just that we moved out of our own homes so that our kids could stay in the houses that we owned. Many of us took equity and bought ourselves a new house, of which that's what my husband and I did, which that's where I said, God bless my husband, because that he was Michael's stepdad. He wasn't his biological dad, that he just really felt that this was what we needed to do on Michael's behalf. And I'm very thankful and grateful for that. One of the things that I started again thinking about, and again familiarizing myself with what are the needs of an adult, is looking at access to healthcare for Michael, because one, it happened to be that his neurologist, pediatric neurologist, said, it would be a good idea for you to start looking at a neurologist that treats adults. And I was like, what? You're not going to do this forever, kind of thing. As I didn't know. I did know. I'd been in the medical, but I just didn't really, it didn't resonate with me quite yet. So I found a new neurologist, which we still have, and just start looking for a new internal medicine doctor. And although we did not have success with the first few family family doctors. He has an internal medicine doctor that he's had again for probably about 15 years and been very happy with both doctors. But that takes a process of, again, you're having to restart another relationship, get people to understand when you go in that doctor's office, the support needs that he needs, so that it's a very pleasant experience for everyone. It's meeting his disability needs. And again, it just kind of, it sits in your lap. It's like, if I don't do it, it's not going to happen. And it's going to be a miserable time for most everybody. So I did do the training, not only for the doctors and for the support staff, the front office staff, and for the doctor, the nurses or the medical assistants, because it was the work up front that was going to save Michael and me a lot of heartache on the back end, trying to retrain and reteach people over and over again. And especially when one of Michael's trigger words, of all things, a trigger word for him that will trigger significant aggression. And mind you, he's 6'1" and weighs 200 pounds. His trigger word is okay. And how many times can I tell you that anybody says the word okay, especially in a health setting? I mean, in a medical setting, is, are you okay? Is this all right? Can I take your blood pressure? Is that okay? And I mean, just to be able to set it up so that people knew not to say, are you okay? Still takes a lot of effort. Guardianship, I can tell you that again was, one of those things of talking about at an early, or thinking about, although I thought about it, unfortunately, I did wait until the last minute because I was just overwhelmed even with the process of it. But fortunately, I was connected, and this is what the role that Malia plays in Kitsap County is. I tapped into the Parent Coalition, and the Parent Coalition had a list of guardianship attorneys that could help with the guardianship process. Although obviously that the Parent Coalition didn't vet the attorneys, at least they had you could have a list of them, and then also be able to get any sort of referrals from other families that had gone through them. It was a very helpful piece. I didn't have to do a lot of research, because I knew of, 3 families right off the bat that went with this one attorney, and I'm like, that's the one we're going with. And then it's not only figuring out who's going to be the guardian, or if it's going to be a co-guardianship, or if it's going to be a guardian with a standby guardian, and then identifying the types of guardianship, whether it's going to be guardianship for only the estate, or guardianship for only medical, or guardianship for a whole life. And so those are all questions that need to happen. And I can tell you, this is kind of it is a funny side story, that because of Michael and his love of nuns, his love of churches, basically, room, and just, I've got my social story, I've got the visual, I've got everything set up in front of him, so he's going to be able to do this well. That when the judge came in, I mean, Michael just stood up, and he was just so reverent. And I thought, what's going on? And then I realized, the judge had a black robe on, and Michael was just so he was just so enthralled with this guy in a black robe that he asked him questions, and he was just very, he wasn't at all frightened or afraid. And I was like, oh, thank God for small gifts, because it was kind of funny. So the other thing is looking at Social Security at the age of 18. And then who's going to be the payee? There is a lot of work that goes to the payee process. I mean, for the person to get Social Security, I remember going to Social Security trainings and learning that even if your loved one is still living at home, have them apply for Social Security. And you can also charge them for rent that you don't that it is important for you to charge them rent. Where you put that money is your own business. And that business could be, you decide to put it into a special needs trust. You could put it in into an ABLE account. There are ways that you can put money aside for your loved one through Social Security, even when they're living at home. And then the other thing that I always suggest for folks is, well, obviously your Social Security will say, make sure you have a separate account that is just for the person's Social Security. The other thing I would say, make sure that you have some sort of software program, because it makes it so much easier to file your reports. Like I use Quicken. And so when I was his payee, I'm no longer his payee, thank God, that I would use Quicken. So anything I paid was out, that I had it accounted for and Quicken. So if I want to run any report, I can do it. And then I can put it in with a filing, not only, excuse me, with the Social Security Department, but also then with the county when it came to the guardianship papers and the filings that need to happen annually. So those would be some of my suggestions when it comes to Social Security and Social Security payee. I already talked about the community-based instruction. That was the program that I set up for Michael that, like I said, wasn't going to meet his needs, what their transition program was, but what I set up and how I hired and who I trained, Michael was able to go into the community on a daily basis of 3 hours a day, be able to go do his grocery shopping, banking, and a recreational activity. And then I I did pay for his transportation. Sometimes he would ride the bus, and other times he would ride with his care provider, and I would pay them their mileage. And again, this was all on the tab of the school district that happened to go through the 501c3 that I was the executive director of, that then obviously it was being accounted for, and Michael was getting the needs and the training of the staff so that he could get the transition program that was what was best for him. The other thing to remember, again, as lifelong case managers as we are, we know that life doesn't happen in a vacuum. We need to capture the history. If we don't, it always has a way of repeating itself. What types of medications, what type of programs, what type of practice services and supports have been used. It is a way that you're able to capture things instead of having something that's repeated without understanding of where we have been. It also becomes a reminder of who this person is, the journey through their life, sometimes the trauma that they have experienced. One of the examples, I think I've given this on many occasions, is I worked with a gentleman that lived at Francis Haddon Morgan Center, which was one of the rehabilitation centers or institutions for the state of Washington. And the one, a sentence that he would say, and it was the only thing that he said really clear other than profanity, was time to get up now. And I remember working with him and I thought, time to get up now, that might be, that must be something related to getting up in the morning. And so I asked a friend of mine that I had befriended at the institution, and I said, why does Brock say it's time to get up now? And she said, well, that has to do actually with trauma. When he would get upset, and he became aggressive, that there would be a response, response team was called, and they would run anywhere between 8 to 11 people, and they would take these pads and with handles, and they would push him down onto the floor into a corner and keep him there until he would stop moving. And when he would stop moving, the lead person would take the pad back and say, it's time to get up now. And so when he would say, it's time to get up now, that meant he was starting to escalate. So what we thought as being a very benign type of comment really had meaning for him. And so we wanted to be reminded that this is one of the things that this man knows of himself. And it just happens to be the cause and effect of when he's feeling anxious, he will say, it's time to get up now. We want to keep that information. We don't want a person to have to go through one trauma after another if we don't capture the history. We want to keep the end in mind and work backwards. Like I said, when I started working and thinking about Michael, what is his adult life going to be like? And then worked backwards. I was able to accomplish, I would say, a lot of things in Michael's life that really mitigated a lot of redundancy and helped him grow to the point where he is currently now, although he's not in a companion home. That is something that I want to revisit again, but because of, again, situations 32 years after divorce, that a supported living environment is the safest for Michael. But he is the only one that lives there. And that took a lot of advocacy. That took a lot of work because basically the policy is that there won't be one person living in a home. And what would happen is if Michael lived with another person or even two other people, somebody would be hurt. And the likelihood is that Michael would have gone to an institution. And so my argument was Michael can live in the community at a third the cost of a person living in an institutional setting, that he would have quality of life. And that was basically my proposal, to say that this, and that Michael has an intractable seizure disorder that he is capable of getting physically hurt, that somebody needs to be focused on him. We were able to get him the support needs that he really needs. And hopefully throughout this whole thing is celebrate each moment or movement on your path, however big or small. And like I said, for as I would not wish a divorce on anyone, there was the silver lining is that I had every other weekend to myself from Friday night until Sunday night, that I could do something and things on my own, that I would, just being able to get through, say, a traumatic experience at the emergency room with Michael, and then being able to get in the car and go home and then just kind of breathe. That is like, we did it. We made it through that. Those are the celebrating. And people might say, well, you're just kind of, looking through rose-colored glasses. Well, if it is, so be it, because I feel that is, I'm going to look at the positive things, because dwelling on something that's negative isn't going to solve anything. A picture is worth 1,000 words. One of the things, though I'm not going to show it to you tonight, is that I literally have a group of pictures, a compilation of pictures that shows Michael with different people doing different things. It isn't a video, but it is pictures of throughout his whole childhood, to give a snapshot of who Michael is. He is a man that lives in his community. He's a brother. He's an uncle. He's a cousin. He's a friend. He's my son. There are more to him than just a disability. And then Suzanne, you said, who do we set this up with? Are you referencing the ACAP?
There's a lot of really good information that you have, but I don't know how to do any of it.
Well, that's I appreciate that, because I didn't either. I just thought, this is what I want to do. And so for the ACAP project, I got a hold of ACAP and I said, how did you do this?
tell me how I can replicate this. And they gave me a roadmap. This is how you do it. This is who the school people I talked with. So that was like, for that program, that's what I did, is just reached out to get just information so that I can go, this is where this is how I'm gonna do it. And then I did it. And I can tell you then that is something that you yourself are gonna need to follow through with, though it, I can tell you that you can get a lot more flies with honey than you can with, what is it? You get more flies with honey than
Vinegar.
you do with vinegar. Is that the
Yeah.
analogy?
So did you have to do something with financing to get because I mean, we have a hard time getting extended school year to be
Mhm.
approved.
And
And
what,
the
yeah,
current extended school year programs, from what I hear, aren't great.
exactly. And so, and what ACAP's going to tell you, and what I did is one, getting together with families. I had, I think, 7 or 8 families that I worked with, and they had individual family support, so that they had different, or they had respite hours, and they wanted to use their respite hours for this project during the summer. So they gave, their hours, for that month, a certain amount of hours. And then we went to the school district and said, what we need from you is a certain amount of dollars for transportation. You're not going to have to do anything that has to do with the education for the extended school year if you do the transportation. And they were able to come through with the transportation. And then I worked with Washington State University here in Vancouver and talked with the educational department and looked for teachers that needed practicum work. And so these were new teachers that would work and do their practicum at no cost. And then families would, obviously, they would put in a certain amount so that their loved one would have an opportunity to be able to go to a movie, to go to different things. But basically what it was a weaving, and it was certainly, I mean, a weaving, a meshing, whatever it was, to be able to make all these financial resources work together. Because like I said, it doesn't exist unless you try and figure out how to make it happen. And I can tell you, having 2 or 3 voices together make it much more powerful, especially if you're going to the school, to be able to say to the special ed director, we've got 3, 4 families here that want to do this project. This is what we want to do. We want our loved ones to be able to have opportunity in the community, that they can have community-based instruction, that they can be able to ride public transportation, all the things that we want them to do during the summer that obviously become points of regression when they come back to school in the fall, that these are some of the good reasons of doing it. And I would start that conversation at the beginning of the school year to say, so I would start like September or October of next year. In the meantime, put together a plan. And if that's something, Malia, that the Parent Coalition would like to work on, that would be a project that we could kind of put together some sort of path that we can work on figuring out how and who and how do we get people involved and how do we make the finances work? Because it's just, surprisingly, it's, as you can see, I did a lot of different things, and I didn't have many people ever say no. They were like, tell me more. Because they're like, how do we make this work? And I can tell you, although, and I did this project for Michael for 5 years. And that was through the end of middle school through high school that I had his extended school year. And especially with extended school year for high school, that's almost unheard of. But because he was of transition age,
that they, I could show that he had regression. He had made no, progress on any of his community participation. I mean, I had points that I was able to take and say, this is what we can work on, and I would ensure that he was going to make progress. If not progress, he would not regress. And that would be an important thing.
So did you take report cards from previous years and then
Yes.
show that?
Yep, exactly. And you can show, especially, at the, like if you look at last year's, usually the first semester, you'll have your progress reports and you can see the progress that a student has made. But you could also measure, because September, October through November are basically, and sometimes all the way through December, are all regression is trying to get back up to where you left off at the end of the school year prior. January through May are actually teaching months that
Oh, wait. You went on mute somehow.
I sure did. I went mute. So you want to show that, like I said, I don't know if you heard me, that I said usually between September and the end of December, it's all making up from skills that were regressed, and that is through January through the end of May that students actually learn new skills. And then usually the end of May through June is testing and fun.
Yeah,
So if you're able to look at what your loved one was able to do during a certain time frame, the amount of regression they showed, that these are obviously are potential ways that you can that you have data, because that's the thing that's going to make or break a program of any sort. You have to have data. And so taking data to be able to say, like if you were to do something for next summer, I would say have your teachers start making data, taking data, and that you want to see whether they're, like if they're on an IEP, are they making progress on their goals and objectives? Tell me where they are and where might they make improvement. These are places where you can capture that information that become basically the basis for your request. And like I said, I had the fortunate opportunity to be able to work with ESD, our educational service district, and then, have the opportunity to develop my own 501c3, because these are opportunities that gave me a lot of insight to different things that I would not have otherwise known about. Things that you need to get to know as your loved one is starting to age, well, actually through any milestone, is, your Department of Social and Health Services, Developmental Disability Administration. There's also the, it's ADSA, Aging and Disability Services, ADSA. There's also the county developmental disabilities. So each county, like Kitsap County, has their own developmental disabilities that is separate from the state Developmental Disabilities Administration. So the county manages early intervention services, early childhood services, and adult day program, which means employment, community inclusion services. Become familiar with the
possible
department.
to get on DDA and ALTSA and to receive those day programs. You just have to know who to talk to.
That's right. And the thing is that, again, the important thing is make a plan. And then if there are ways that you can use resources, that's good. But if you go to Developmental Disabilities Administration and think that they're going to fill your need, that's not going to happen. But how oftentimes it's, how do I interweave what I have with resources I might have available to me, and maybe other community resources, because there is the grandest likelihood that none of these are going to meet your needs, but the combination of 2 or 3 most likely will. And I can tell you through the Department of Social and Health Services, Developmental Disability Administration, the County Developmental Disabilities, the Special Needs Trust through the Washington State ARC, are all things, and the Housing Authority are all things that I utilize to make Michael's life and Social Security part that makes his life successful in the community. I can't just pinpoint one, and that is, I would say, oftentimes a very unfortunate and unfair reality is that we have to learn all these resources, or at least become familiar with them, because if you don't, you can't ask the questions. You can't say, where else can I go to? And what I would say, whenever you get the word no, say, where else can I look for this to answer this question? Because there's a likelihood of whoever you come in contact with any of these agencies, the only thing that they can give you are the resources that are available and the answer of no to any question that you might have, or any request you might have. You have to go, that old analogy, it's not within my pay scale to make that determination. And that is what most people at the level that we communicate with are not at that pay level to make those determinations to create a new program or to combine resources. That sometimes has to be done at a different level. One of the things that, again, being planful, being ready for Michael to take the community plunge. And that meant, was I ready for Michael to be able to live in the community with resources or supports to help him live in the community? And it was hard at first, but I can tell you the positive outcome of the companion home is that on the original project was that the companion home was more in the line of kind of an extended family, that we worked together on behalf of Michael. We took, I still took weekends with Michael. His dad took weekends with Michael. So it was like I said, it was a village, and you could still make a companion home a village. And like I said, though, that is something that our service agency or service system doesn't provide. It's what we are able to pull together in a process of building a community around our loved ones to make it feasible. If we wait till the last minute, I can tell you that's when things get sometimes scary, because especially if you have, let's say, an aging parent that, and this has happened, just working with communication support for a gentleman whose mom, who was the one who did everything for him really in his life, and she contracted cancer, and within 18 months she had passed away. And Dad kind of bowed out of his life, and he really has no one in his life. And he's actually Michael's age. I think he's 38, 39. And it breaks my heart. But there wasn't anything that was in place to create more of a village. And that's what that is what it takes. And that is, be it bad or good, the school system has a village. you've got teachers, special education teachers. You've got, if you have an OT, PT, speech and language pathologist, there are, other teachers, there's librarians, there the school staff, and now they have family resource coordinators, something, anyway, schools that help. They have social workers. There is a village within a school to be able to at least look at the needs of an individual. That unfortunately becomes not the scenario when our sons, daughters, loved ones exit school. That you kind of step up into a bigger role to make sure that their life is more fulfilled and complete. Oobla dee, oobla da, life goes on. What's next? What are your plans? What do you want? What do you see? Based on what I even talked about today. I mean, looking at if your kids in early childhood, elementary, middle school, high school, transition, looking at adult life. And I didn't talk about, really other than Michael's residential, about what his day programs look like. But there's and I can tell you it does change. What was available 23 years ago has now changed exponentially, that you just, keeping your finger on information. Again, that's one of the roles of what the Parent Coalition does, just keeping you informed or keeping you updated on maybe new policies, or keeping you in contact with the ARC of Washington, that they can keep and they can give you information on what new policies are rolling out, what are the new ideas that DDA is coming up with, what are some of the things that other families have pulled together without the resources of any service plan or service system, because they all exist. It is sometimes just asking questions. It's, keeping your ear to the rail to see if there's any changes, or, just tapping into other, support resources. What are you doing? What are you thinking? I mean, I can think of a couple of places in the state that families came together and they actually built townhomes for their sons and daughters that they lived in. And then they had one of the townhomes was a person who would basically become their care providers. And they had the townhomes set up so that each person, it was based on their needs. So there weren't, in one place, they didn't have any microwaves. They only had a stove top. There was, and I didn't show this to you, but they actually used smart home technology so that the care provider could have constant options of seeing the individual when they were sleeping, but then on the other hand, they were interacting with them throughout the day and going in and doing things. So there isn't a one size fits all. There isn't a one opportunity that fits all. It is, what would you like to see? Our plans, I talked about my daughter Molly moving up. I mean, the whole reason why they moved up was because they knew that I was going to live forever. I was completely delighted with their move. And, the idea that, Molly was like, there's got to be a time where we plan the transition of Michael moving up here. And she said, you're going to have to move up here, Mom. And I'm like, what? No, what? I'm like, she goes, Michael, if we need to do this sooner than later. And I was like, and she goes, I can see within the next 5 to 7 years that you need to move up here with Michael, that we're going to have to, establish our, the relationship with those agencies, which now I've already thought in my mind, all right, I've got to get in contact with Pierce County. I need to get to know people. I need to really, grease the skids for my next plan or my next movement with Michael. And so it's, like I said, this is a lifelong journey, and enjoy the steps, grieve over what wasn't or what isn't, take and discover and just relish the joyful pieces, however small or minute they might be. Those are the things that are going to get you through. And then also having a circle of friends, a circle of people, be it virtual or if in person, that would be great. And just keep yourself aware of what can be, because you don't have to always go by what is available by the service system. Because I can tell you all those service system supports and services that are in place were all part of an advocacy through people either with disabilities or their guardians that have put through legislation of that is the programs and things were developed with advocates who advocated for these policies and procedures. So if you have something else and something different, then talk about it. Don't keep it to yourself. Think about who can I get involved in this project? How might I make this happen? You'd be surprised, very surprised. So that's what I have for you tonight. Please feel free to reach out to me. This is my email is mmeyer0801@gmail.com. My website is monicameyer.com. It still needs to be updated with newer pictures of Michael and Molly and some of my blogs that I have been posting lately. And I wish you all very, very a lot of success and a lot of hope for the future. So that's what I have.
Are there any questions? There's something out the Dan Thompson Fund was awarded to Partners for Housing, and they do a free housing assessment. And that might be a first start.
Absolutely. And like I said, the ARC of the state ARC houses all, or I should say not houses, but manages all the parent coalitions. And they have a lot of resources there, as well as Malia has a lot of resources. The parent coalitions are really great resources, if not parent to parent. If you have children that are younger, that would also be a great resource to be able to tap into.
Let's see. That's the Partners for Housing. Yeah, I send out a newsletter once a month that with upcoming events and news, advocacy information at the legislative or the school or medical, what have you.
Yep.
Whatever you need changed, we can figure it out.
Yeah, what it takes is just somebody to just say something.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it starts.
And it sounds like you were pretty creative with some of those solutions. So
Yeah, because it really met Michael's needs. It wasn't there wasn't a roadmap for it. And that's the one thing that Michael did teach me. Believe it or not, I was, well, you could believe it especially at the very beginning of Michael's life, I didn't ask for help. I don't like asking for help. I've learned to ask for help. And although I'm here doing training and advocacy, and I do a lot of activism on behalf of people with disabilities, that was not my forte in life. So that I am doing this type of work, it's sometimes I remark about it because it's like, holy cow, I would not have spoken up for anything, in my youth, but that's all I do now is just speak up. So thank you all.
Yeah, I guess it was good you got fired from that job.
I know, seriously.
I know those are counting your blessings. It's like, well, there's a
turned
reason
out.
why I didn't go there.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, everybody have a good night.
Oh,
and-
before we go, there was some people, I didn't get their email and I wanted to send the link out to these slides.
Yes.
So I'm gonna just hang around. I'm gonna hit the stop record right now. All right.
And I will